listening to the Film Monsters Podcast with Nate and Ray.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Film Monsters Podcast. I, as always, am Nate.
And I, as always, am not.
Hello, I'm not.
I am Ray, everybody.
And this is our final sci-fi episode. Well, not probably final forever on the podcast,
thanks,
but
everyone.
Our final
It's
science
been real.
fiction. Our final science fiction themed episode of this 5-episode series. And honestly, Ray, I've had so much fun doing this series. It's easier for me when we're focused on a topic because my head's always like, I can pick this movie or I can pick this movie. Whereas before we were jumping all over the place and I'm like, well, what genre am I going to pick this time for this movie and this time for this movie?
I remember being like, when we did the first 10 episodes that we were just doing random topics. By the time we reached episode 9, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do anymore. So then when we talked about doing these themes, I'm like, this will make it so much easier for me to come up and narrow in my brain, because I wasn't having a hard time because I couldn't think of movies. It was because there were so many of them that I couldn't just focus on a genre. So this has been so much easier to deal with.
And I feel like you and I are both people who have a very wide array of interests when it comes to film. And so it's difficult because two of us who we have this platform to gush about movies where we're constantly sitting at home bugging the shit out of our wives saying, listen to me talk about this. And now we have the platform to do it in this format. And it's we want to talk about so much, but having it to where we can break it down to talk about specifics kind of helps us break it down enough to where we're okay, I got my science fiction out this time, that now I can get my horror out or I can get my drama movies out.
Well, I feel it's just that way with anybody I come in contact with. There's people at work that I've mentioned in passing about the podcast, and they're there was this lady that I was working with, and she's like, oh, what are you going to do this week? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to record my podcast with my friend. Oh, what are you guys going to talk about? And I think this was for I forget what topic it was. It was for the sci-fi one and that we did a few weeks back, and she's like, oh, what movies are you going to pick? So I listed the movies, and she's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
We figured this would be fun because we're talking about sci-fi movies, and Ray and I both just watched a new science fiction film that was released this year that was a Shudder exclusive, and that is the master Phil Tippett's Mad God. And Ray, what was your initial reactions to this movie?
Okay, so...
That's
that was my initial reaction.
My thoughts exactly. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. This is the most bizarre movie I've seen in a while. I'll start with that. I liked it. There are some parts I even loved. Definitely not a movie for the mainstream crowd, though.
No, I think this would be a perfect movie to put on a giant projector in the background of a Halloween party. I think it's impossible, regardless of the story of this, which, if you look into this and you read the plot description, it's barely a plot. It's they give you this character, which they call the assassin, who you're following through this, horrible hellscape world. And I feel there's things you can take away about a commentary on society. I thought it was really poignant, that scene where there was that large machine that was manufacturing those things that looked like people, and then they would immediately start working on something, and then that giant steamroller came by and just mauled half of them. And I was oh, the way corporations view human beings as just cogs in a machine. And I feel there's little things that you can pull from that, but I also think that there's it really wears it took 30 years on its sleeve, where I don't know if it bugged you, but the scenes where they pulled out from the really beautiful stop motion to do those scenes with people dressed in costumes, sometimes it was charming, sometimes it came across as really cheap.
Yeah, I really wish they would have just stuck with fully stop motion, for sure. I think what I did love about it, and I know, shocker, I'm about to gush about a score again. But I think in this case, though, this is one of those cases, though, where the score is not just just something cool in the background. Like, I feel like the score is like front and center because there's no dialogue, because there is no one actually feeding you information. You're just watching this thing and you get this really intense music kind of leading you through the story. And even if there isn't much of a plot going on, some of that music with those visuals, it feels like a really, disturbing music video.
Yeah, I feel like what I gained from this film is that Phil Tippett likes eyeballs, ball sacks, and breasts. Literally, like, every monster had like some sort of like phallic looking part on them, like 50,000 eyeballs, and then some of them had these weird looking tits that would like hang down, and I was like, yeah, this guy's into some weird shit.
I am always, though, a big like defender of stop motion. I feel like it's an art form. It does not get nearly enough love. I mean, some of that stuff was really like almost offensive to look at. Like, you have that monster that's like just crapping on everything.
Yes, 100%. There's such a creative vision on that.
And I really did like it, but I feel like I was with it until the assassin gets kidnapped.
Yes, and then they tried to make it seem like those doctors were drilling into his head and like looking, I perceived it as like looking at his thoughts for how he even got there. You jump to where he was out of there, just like randomly. And I was like, so are they looking in his brain to like see why he was carrying that briefcase? I couldn't 100% piece it together, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of did get lost at a few times. I understand that this is one of those movies that's definitely up to interpretation for the viewer, but I do feel like it teeters a line between, is this up to interpretation, or you just really wanted to add something grotesque just to add something grotesque?
I think Phil Tippett had a vision, and I think he had things that he wanted to say. Clearly, like what I was saying about like the workforce, I feel like there's things you could pull, but I do think this film suffers from the 30-year production. I think that it's like you work on something and you run out of funding, and you get to a point where you're like, okay, we got to put this on hold for a while. Well, when you come back to it, your idea for the vision of what the film was going to be probably has changed over that amount of period of time. So he might not have thought the same things about the work as he did when he was done with it. Because I felt like, I don't know if you agree, but I felt like the end was really jarring. And I felt like the last probably like 15 minutes of the movie was really all over the place.
That's why, like, I think at that point it just tuned out my trying to grasp at a story or a message, and I was just, like I said, just kind of like I was just enjoying a really bizarre music video from the 90s.
Exactly. And it's hard to, say that this movie isn't good, because it is good. This is clearly a passion project. It's a work of love from someone who cares. And like Ray said, stop motion is such an incredible art form. I feel like people don't give enough credit for. And this movie truly is a haunting work of art. And I do see myself revisiting this at some point in the future. It's just one that I so badly wanted to love, and I just ended up liking it.
Yeah, same. I do hope that there's like a physical release for it, because I would like to dive into the special features and the creation of it, because maybe there's just something, like you said, they got lost in translation between the project taking so long to be completed and having no dialogue and being all visual. Like, I wonder if there's just a disconnect there that maybe is talked about on the special features, because I'm on the same boat. I wanted to love it. In fact, I was ready to slap it on my top 10 of the year, and then the movie finished. I'm like, yeah, that was cool, but I definitely didn't, this definitely isn't going to be on my top 10.
Yeah, unfortunately, on my Letterboxd list, it didn't even make my top films of the year. I couldn't see putting it over a lot of the things I've watched. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, it truly is a labor of love. It was just one that, like, I still would recommend that if you're a horror fan or a fan of, like, filmmaking in general, or you're interested in stop motion animation, just like thinking about this on a technical level, it's so worth watching. And it really is a visual spectacle. And if you have a Shudder subscription, I mean, Shudder has a lot of great content. They also have a lot of shitty content. And I would say this is like one of the better ones that you could sit down and watch.
If for anything else, like you said, just the style of animation alone is insane, and at least it's worth watching for that.
We're in the season of sci-fi, and today Ray and I are going to talk about time travel movies, which I know Ray and I talked about this off podcast beforehand, but this list was a little harder to come up with than I thought it would be. For some reason, I thought in my head, like, oh man, I have this immense list of time travel movies, but it's crazy. I feel like time travel is this really fascinating concept that's been explored in literature and in film, but it hasn't been explored as much as I thought over like this immense period of time as long as art has existed.
I feel like time travel movies have become like you have, I feel like in every genre there is your more lighthearted and less cerebral genres. So like, when it comes to like, you have your comfort chick flick movies, you have your very generic horror movies. So I feel that for sci-fi, the time traveling is not a cerebral concept, but I feel like a lot of people will use time travel as a way to kind of do the more accessible movies. When you get to the cerebral aspect of it, it's like, I'm not going to say this because it might be a movie on your list. But there's some movies that I watched that I was like, oh, this is actually a really basic, thoughtless movie that just happens to use time travel to get to the point, but they're not making the time travel aspect like a centerpiece of it. It's just a plot device to get the fun fart joke from point A to point B.
I feel like with time travel, because I think that's such a fascinating idea, for me personally, some of my favorite things about time travel and in films in general is this whole idea of like, when you go back in time, not messing with things, because if you mess with something, it can screw up the entire fabric of reality. Because like this whole idea of that our society exists because of a series of events that happen, that even something in like the most basic person's life of like, did they take a left turn in their car? Did they take a right turn in their car? Could change the entire fabric of the universe. It's something that just sends your mind spiraling. And obviously I won't be able to talk about it on this episode because it's not a movie, but Doctor Who is a TV show that I love quite a bit and I followed over the years. Doctor Who is really lighthearted and fun, and it's enjoyable because the characters are so well written, but at the same time there's this concept of like, hey, we can go back in time, but we can't really fuck with anything, because if we do, it can ruin the entire fabric of the universe, and it could change like how people look or what their kids are, like who they're gonna marry, like just by one little thing changing. And that's my favorite part about time travel, is just how one minuscule event can change the entire fabric of reality.
Well, so like I said, I gave us a hint on last week's episode. Once we hit those 88 miles per hour, we're going back to the future, my friend.
Yes! Oh my god. So you know what's funny, Ray? I showed my wife Back to the Future for the first time ever this year. She had never seen it before. And my god, watching a person experience Back to the Future the first time is a great experience, because they're like, wow, this is a fun time travel movie, and they don't expect the incest. No, nobody ever expects that plot line to happen. But you know what? I give them some credit, because this movie was an enormous blockbuster, and the fact that like it goes in that direction to kind of poke at that humor, it's incredible to me. Like it really stands the test of time as one of the greatest, not only time travel films, but just comedies of all time.
I love Back to the Future. It is, if I were to do an all-time favorite list, Back to the Future would easily be on my top 10. There's just something about those movies that they're entertaining, they're fun, but they also have a link to my childhood. I mean, watching those movies as a kid with my parents, by myself when I was home, and I love that, and I love MJ Fox. I mean, I am heartbroken that he suffered so much at such a young age from such a horrible disease. But so there's just so much about this trilogy in general that I love. There's obviously, if you stop and think about it too hard, you can really poke holes in the logic of this movie. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to see a DeLorean travel through time, but also, the consequences of something small, like interrupting with the first meeting of your parents. I mean, I know that the incest thing can be kind of funny and gross, but at the same time, it's like, there's something to be said that like just interfering with that small moment could alter things so drastically.
Exactly. And one of the things I want to say before we get into talking about this too much too is when you look at a film franchise like Back to the Future, I mean, you look at directors like Steven Spielberg who have had immense careers after creating a film like this, and I feel like Robert Zemeckis is someone that people don't give enough credit for. Robert Zemeckis has had an incredible film career. And like, not only did he make all three Back to the Future films, this guy went on to make Forrest Gump, Contact, What Lies Beneath, Flight, as of the past couple of years. I mean, Death Becomes Her, which is an absolute classic to me, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, this guy made some incredible movies, and to think that this was so early in his career that he crafted a film between modern day memes and just everything you see, there's so many hallmarks from this movie that are there. And what I love about it is the time travel aspect is such a pivotal part of the movie, but it just makes the gags even more heightened. Like, even something as simple as, like, at the beginning of the film when Michael J. Fox travels back and people are just like mocking his clothes and his outfits that he's wearing, like simple stuff like that is just like, it elevates the humor for me to another level.
Also, I really appreciate the attention to detail. Like, I know this is something that's been pointed out, but I still appreciate it so much. Like, there's that scene where when he gets at the very beginning, when he goes to meet Doc Brown, and he goes to the Twin Pine Mall, and then because he travels back in time and runs over one of the pines, when he goes back, it's only the Lone Pine Mall. So just little things like that were altered because of his actions. I think that's really, really fascinating. And also little things like when he was like, yeah, we saw this on a rerun. And they're like, the hell is a rerun?
Also, I thought you'd think this was cool, Ray, talking about our episode last week, because I thought this was a cool connection. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this fact, but did you know that Hill Valley in Back to the Future is the same set as Kingston Falls in Gremlins?
Are you serious? Oh, wait.
It's the same back. It's the same backlot. The same Burger King is used. And that, like, if you watch it, it's the same backlot. Universal Studios in Hollywood. If you go to the Hollywood Universal Studios, you can still visit that backlot that Back to the Future and Gremlins.
I have. I just didn't put that together for some reason.
But I love, too, in this movie, and I know you were talking about, like, the humor and stuff, but I love the concept of the DeLorean and that the time-traveling element is in this car. And I think that it adds this really heightened level of suspense. Like, when Marty McFly is in the mall parking lot at the beginning and he has to make that jump, the fact that he's being chased that whole time, and it adds that really, like, extra level of tension to where you've had all this great character development showing his family life and everyone around him at the beginning of the movie, that, like, when his life's in danger, you're like, no, go, get out of here. And you saw Doc get gunned down in, like, the first 15 minutes. And it's just, like, such an incredibly well-paced movie to where you're hooked from the moment this thing starts.
Yeah, I can't say enough things about it. And obviously, like, critics over the years have picked it apart and shown some of the just inaccuracies of it, but honestly, like, for when this thing was written, it's just astounding of some of the things that they got away with. I mean, I love the fact that this movie, and I say love in kind of a cynical way, that this movie originally wasn't going to have MJ Fox. They got a different actor who, I guess one of the reasons why it didn't work out with the original actor is because he wanted to take it in a more serious route. Like, you know, this needs to be a character drama, and he just wasn't a good fit. And then they got Michael J. Fox to come in, and he kind of gave it that lighthearted, fun spin. And, you know, he was coming off the fame of Family Tie, so he was just the perfect fit to turn that movie from, like, a darker, more serious drama to a more lighthearted, accessible film.
I think you said that perfectly, Ray. I'm really glad you brought up Back to the Future, because I know, like, I joked about it when I brought up The Thing in my science fiction list, but, like, sometimes the classics are the best, and, like, Back to the Future really is one of the greatest time travel movies ever made. I think that it's, like, quintessential in utilizing time travel in a way that it's like, hey, you've got to go back and make sure this thing happens, otherwise you may never be born. And that's like such, it's funny because it's such a heavy subject matter, but they're able to blend it with comedy so well. I have to say, before we end our discussion on this film, I would be remiss if I did not mention the great and incredible Christopher Lloyd, who, oh my God, like, he is Doc Brown. You could never remake this movie because no one would be able to play Doc Brown. And honestly, I don't think anybody could replace Crispin Glover.
No, they kind of just had to write him out on the next two sequels which is funny because he like famously hated working in this movie.
It doesn't surprise me. There's so many times where you see movies that people that like they're huge successes. I mean, think about, we love Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford hated working on Star Wars.
Yeah, that is true.
He hated it. So, I mean, and think about it now, he's embraced it and he loves how much people care about it, but it just wasn't his thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is what it is, but I'm glad you picked this movie, Ray. I fucking love Back to the Future. And now I watched Back to the Future 1 this year. Now I need to sit down and watch 2 and 3 again because it's been years since I've watched 2 and 3.
Oh, no, I usually when I watch them, I will just watch one after the other. I usually always, like there's a lot of people that will do the Lord of the Ring trilogies and they'll just watch them back to back. I will do that with the Back to the Future ones. I always put one after the other.
All right, so my first pick, this is going to be hilarious to you, Ray, because you're not even going to believe it, but this is a film that came out this year, and believe it or not, it's a film that has not been critically well received, but I actually loved the hell out of this movie, and that is Pixar's Lightyear.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's so good. So this movie, simply enough, is like the movie opens and it says like, this is the film that Andy watched in 1995 before Toy Story. And you open up on Buzz Lightyear and this crew are in this really huge ship and they have all these people in cryo sleep. What happens is they land on this planet and they want to see whether or not it's inhabitable. And so they get out and they find these like tree-like vine creatures that are attacking them. And so Chris Evans is like, no, who plays Buzz Lightyear brilliantly. He sounds like Tim Allen at a lot of moments. It's just so well done. But he decides like, hey, this is inhabitable. We can't do it. So his partner, he tells her like, hey, her name's Hawthorne. He tells her like, hey, we can't be here. We've got to go. So they run back to the ship and they get on it. Well, all the ships have this autopilot initiated. And because Buzz Lightyear is that, captain who's always trying to like, I know everything correctly, I know all the decisions I should make, I'm gonna do what I want, the autopilot tells him if he goes this way that he's gonna crash, and he says, I don't believe it, you're lying, whatever, I'm gonna do it, and he ends up crashing the plane. Well, when he crashes it, they get out and they realize they've destroyed the hyperdrive and that there's no way for them to get off the planet. So they have to spend this time developing this technology to try to see whether or not they can create the chemical formula for the hyperdrive. And Buzz is the one who's tasked to test it. Well, when he goes to test it in the first 10 minutes of the movie, he shoots off, goes into space and does this slingshot. Well, when he comes back, like 15 years has gone by. And every time that he tests it out, 15 years goes by. So he doesn't age, but everyone he knows around him on the planet, it's 22 years. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. 22 years. Every time he comes back, those people around him age. And so he's watching all these people that he's close to grow old. And every time he goes back, the city that they're living in this town has expanded. So the time travel element in the movie is every time he comes back to see if this has worked, the people he loves are getting older. And finally, they get to a point where he gets back and there's these new people who are running the place that they don't want him to be able to go anymore. And he has to try to fight to get this formula to try to get these people off the planet. And it just turns into this really amazing, fast-paced science fiction film that is a Pixar movie. And the characters are so lovable. He has this like AI cat who they assigned to him as like an emotional support animal because his name's Socks, because it's been 22 years every time he leaves. And Socks is the one who he tasks to try to create the correct formula. Oh my God, it's so amazing. And it just has that like heart that the Toy Story movies have. And I saw this in the theater and I got home and I was reading reviews, and for some reason I just could not wrap my head around on why people didn't like it more, because it blends science fiction and family comedy so perfectly. And I will admit, like, the beginning is a little repetitive with the time travel element of him coming back, but like it's such a pivotal part to the movie. And then when Zurg is introduced and when you find out the direction that they took Zurg in this movie, it's such an interesting twist to what we know from the Toy Story films. And I just had a blast with this movie, and I thought the time travel element in it was done really well. It was super interesting, and honestly, Ray, I think this is something you'll eat up. It also has an amazing score that I, of course, missed out on, that was pressed by Mondo, and I'm hoping they repress it because the score to this movie is fantastic. My boy Michael Giacchino knocking it out of the park again with an incredible score. And yeah, this is great, Ray. I can't wait for you. I don't know if you have Disney Plus. It's up on Disney Plus now. You need to watch this because you'll love it.
I'll probably just throw it on this weekend or something. It is on Disney Plus, and I saw it. I actually added it to my watch listing. I just kind of haven't gotten around to it, but yeah, now you definitely confirmed that I need to watch it.
I just want to tell you before you get into that, one of the other reasons why I know you will love it is one of Buzz Lightyear's partners when he gets back after all those years is Taika Waititi.
That's even better. I think one of the things that kind of gets me even more intrigued was what some of the plot points you're explaining. They kind of remind me a little bit. I know you haven't seen this movie, but it reminds me a little bit of Interstellar.
Oh, seriously? That's awesome. Yeah, that I think I saw someone on Letterboxd make that comparison. But it's really cool because it has that deep emotional core because his partner Hawthorne that he's so close with, like every time he comes back, she's like in a relationship and then she has kids and he's kind of watching her grow. And it's like, this is this person he's loved and cared for. And every time he gets back, he's the same age. And it's like you're trying to do this because you feel like you fucked up and ruined everyone's lives, but at the same time it's like you're giving up your own existence to try to help these other people. And I just thought that it was amazing. It's one that since I saw it in the theater, I have been super excited to go back and revisit it, and it's one I'm definitely going to pick up on Blu-ray.
It looks like it did do pretty decent critic-wise. It's just it didn't make a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that a lot of user reviews I've noticed were really low on it, and I'm honestly not sure why, and I'll be really interested when you watch it to hear your perception on it. So Lightyear is my first pick. I'm sure that one probably surprised you that was on my list.
A little bit, because I actually didn't even know that was a time-traveling movie.
Yep, the time travel element is one of the biggest parts of it, and it's really fascinating. So hit me with your next pick. I'm ready for it.
My next pick is Army of the freaking Darkness.
You know what's really funny? Army of Darkness was on my list until the very last minute, and I threw something else on instead of it. So I'm glad you put it on there because I wanted to talk about it anyway.
I actually left Interstellar out on purpose because the time traveling aspect of it is kind of spoilery, and because you haven't seen it, I didn't want to get into spoiler territory.
I've actually added onto my list to watch recently because you've been talking about it. But no, believe it or not, Ray, I love Army of Darkness, but it is my least favorite of the Evil Dead series. Although I still have a fond appreciation for what it's trying to do, and Bruce Campbell's performance is amazing. It's still my least favorite one, believe it or not.
I like it better than the first Evil Dead, but I definitely don't like it better than Dead by Dawn.
The thing that kind of upsets me about this movie is I love the time travel element. I feel like it shouldn't even be rated R.
No, not at all.
I feel like it's very, very tame compared to the other Evil Dead films. And I love how campy this movie can get, but the mini ashes, they drive me insane. That scene, I'm always like, God, but I do... There is so many great things. I love all the redheaded knights at the beginning of the movie. That whole beginning sequence and just like the flashback to Evil Dead 2. Like, it gets me excited thinking about it because I do love this. It also has a brilliant score. But I'll let you talk about it because otherwise I'm just going to go into it.
Well, I mean, we both know the story pretty well. We probably have seen this movie more times than we can count, but...
Yes.
I don't know, like, I love this movie. I grew up with this movie. It was one of my childhood movies. I mean, I did watch the other Evil Deads, but for some reason, this one's just... Maybe it's because I was a kid, and this one wasn't quite as scary. I kept going back to this one, and I just think it's a hilarious movie. Because this one's a straight up, like Evil Dead 2, I get that it's a horror comedy, but it can get into that bleak dread a lot. But this one is just a straight up comedy.
It's more of like an adventure movie than anything else, I feel like.
Oh, 100%. What I do love, though, is that, like, that kind of, because usually we always see the fish out of water story of like the guy from the past coming to the future and they don't know how to interact with like new technology. But this one, it's a guy from the future going to the past and not knowing how to interact with old costumes from back then.
And I feel like this movie is really like in Evil Dead 2, Bruce Campbell gives the performance of like slapstick comedy mixed in with that more subdued dramatic role. Like my favorite scene in Evil Dead 2 is when all the stuff in the cabin starts laughing. And he starts like, because I think it's horrifying. Like people watch that movie and like to me that's like you're isolated in this place all by yourself, and that's like the perfect description to me of like you losing your mind. And in this movie it's just Bruce Campbell hamming it up like to the extreme. Like he is going off the rails, just like being as ridiculous, like I'm the superhero that he's been in like any of these movies. And there's parts of that I really, really love. I think that relationship between him and that woman is kind of hammy. Like it feels kind of thrown in. But all the action sequences in this movie are a blast to watch.
I have the best of times every time I watch it. I think one of the things that I love about Ash in this one is that I feel like this, because I feel like in both of the Evil Deads we see a Bruce Campbell trying to figure out who Ash is. And I feel like in Army of Darkness, it ceases to be about Ash, and it's just Bruce Campbell kind of playing himself.
Is that what you got from the? Well, that's just what we call pillow talk, baby. That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite Bruce Campbell lines in that movie.
I think I love Bruce Campbell. I love how ridiculous he is, and I love how he's hammy, but he knows he's hammy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I love about it. I love the whole, like, he forgets how to pronounce the Klatuvarata Niktu. He just keeps forgetting, and he thinks he gets away with it because he fake coughs.
Yeah.
There's just something so hilarious about it. But, that's plays such a interesting thing at the end because he mispronounces the words again. He brings the Deadites back to the present time.
I think the hardest thing for me is like when I watch this movie, I always really enjoy it and have a lot of fun with it. But I will say, compared to the first two Evil Dead movies, the Deadites don't scare me in this.
Oh, not at all.
Compared to the first two movies where I feel like they're a real threat and they're horrifying. This movie, it's like it would be like watching like any sort of like action film from that time period where it's more just like the fun of the film is watching this incredible lead character kind of figure out how to solve this problem. And it's less about the threat of the Deadites, which I think like coming off of Evil Dead 2 where the Deadites are so incredibly well thought out and the structure of them and how they look is so important to the overall plot of the movie, where this is just like, hey, it's Ash. He's going to say goofy lines and fight his way through, which, like I said, I know I'm saying negative things about it. I still love this movie, but I think that's why it's not as impactful to me, even though there are scenes in this movie that, like, every time I recall them in my head, I laugh. Like, even though this is my boomstick line, like, that's such iconic Evil Dead.
I love that part when he's like, your shoelaces are untied. And he punches him.
Yes. There are so many great, like what's the one part where he's like, honey, you got real ugly. There's Bruce, and this is something I kind of want to tangent off this for a minute, but how did Bruce Campbell not become a huge actor? He is so charismatic and funny and personable, and like I know he did Burn Notice, which he was on for a really long time, and obviously the Ash vs. Evil Dead series was brilliant. It was so well done, but like this is a guy that I could see being like a Bill Murray type or somebody who should be doing a million movies. He's so talented.
I wonder if that's almost by choice though, because I watched an interview with him not too long ago. I actually had a chance to meet him too.
Jealous.
Yeah, I have my Army of Darkness score by Mondo signed by him.
Yeah, I don't know. I love this movie. I'm in the same camp as Ray. I feel like I've probably seen this movie 400 times. I'm like you with Back to the Future. When I watch Evil Dead, I actually like go through and watch the entire franchise. Just because I love them so much.
I love Army of Darkness, though. I'm not going to pretend like this isn't just a movie that I gush about all the time to people.
All right, so before I bring up this pick, I want to give a little disclaimer because I think that this is always really important when stuff like this happens. I am aware that this film is made by a person who is incredibly problematic, who has had a lot of terrible things said about him. Similarly to how I feel about Rosemary's Baby, which is like an incredible film made by a terrible person. Sometimes art is made by horrible human beings, but I love this movie a lot, and the movie I'm going to bring up is Midnight in Paris from Woody Allen. Obviously, there's been a lot of things brought to light about Woody Allen over the years that are incredibly problematic, and I understand that he is not by any means a good human being. This is just a movie that I think is really brilliant, and sometimes brilliant films are made by horrible human beings. And so, have you seen this movie, Ray?
No, I'll be honest. I am not very well versed on Woody Allen.
Yeah, so this movie, I actually saw this in 2011 when it was released, and I personally think it's Owen Wilson's best performance in his career. But essentially what the movie is about is Owen Wilson is engaged to Rachel McAdams, and they go take a trip in Paris together before their wedding. And so they're going out together, and he's working on a novel, and his novel is about this guy who works in this shop who, like, he's able to travel back in time and appreciate things from the era that they were made in a little bit more. And he's trying to come up with this idea for his novel, and at the same time you can tell that him and his wife are like butting heads consistently, like that they don't seem to get along very well. So one night he goes out and decides to go get super drunk, and when he's walking home, this taxi pulls up beside him, and he gets in the taxi, and it's a car from the 1920s. And when he gets in there, he travels back in time to the 1920s, and someone introduces him to Cole Porter and Zelda and Scott Fitzgerald, who Scott Fitzgerald is played by Tom Hiddleston. And you have all these people from the 1920s who show up. Gertrude Stein, played by Kathy Bates in this movie, is phenomenal. Ernest Hemingway shows up at one point. Owen Wilson goes and he meets all of these people. Well, he ends up meeting Marion Cotillard from the 20s, and he starts to fall in love with her. And the whole idea of the movie is like Owen Wilson lives in the modern day times, but he's so fascinated with this time period that he's writing about that he wants to live in that time period. Well, then he meets Marion Cotillard's character, who is living in the 1920s, and she wants to live even further back, and she's constantly thinking about wanting to live in a different time period. And the entire film puts into context is like, should we just appreciate the period of time where we live in, because there are problems that have existed in every single time period. I mean, obviously you look at now, people try to look and say, oh, we're not as racist as we used to be, or we're not as homophobic as we used to be, but it still exists. The problems from before are still here. They still exist in our society. And so this movie is all about like, hey, you can appreciate things from a different era, appreciate the time you live in now, and try to make the best of it. And I think that's what really struck me with this movie, is that it was just really beautiful to think about it. And it came out in a period of time where, 2011, I was 21 years old. I was kind of like, I didn't really know where I was going in my life. I was kind of like, I just met my wife, and we started dating, and we saw this movie together, and we both left, and we talked about it for days afterwards because it just was so beautiful. The cinematography is amazing. There's all these redone songs from Cole Porter throughout the entire movie that just work so well. And I think this was nominated for Best Picture that year. But it is an incredible film where the time travel plays such an amazing role. And it's one of those movies that it's like I said, Woody Allen is an incredibly problematic person, whether you're someone out there who believes what he's done. I know he's been to court a million times, like whatever you want to believe about him as a person. He makes some brilliant art, and he has in his life, and he's someone who, my parents really loved Woody Allen when I was growing up, and so I was introduced to a lot of his movies, and this is a film that profoundly impacted me when it was first released. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but I feel like it would still probably resonate with me the same, and I would have been remiss to not bring it up in this episode. So Ray, I think you should 100% check this movie out if you haven't seen it. I think between the score and the visuals and just the overall story, very similarly to like what I talked about with Her. It'll make you feel a lot of things, and I think you'd really enjoy it.
Well, awesome. I'll have to add that to my list.
Absolutely. So, hit me with your next pick.
I'm bringing in your boy Ryan Johnson in.
Oh, God, yep.
I am going to talk about Looper.
You know what's funny? I own this movie on Blu-ray, and I've never seen it.
You're missing out, man. Just get over your Ryan Johnson hate and just watch it.
Listen, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I have a soft spot for Bruce Willis, so I'm sure I will enjoy it. But enlighten me. Let me know what it's all about.
So, I'll read you this little paragraph, because I don't want to butcher it. It says, in the year 2044, 25-year-old Joe works for the Kansas City crime syndicate as an assassin, or as they call him, a looper. And since the tracking systems in the future, in 2074, have made it impossible for you to dispose bodies, what the syndicate does is that they send their enemies back in time where they are executed. So that is the premise of it. They are assassins that the syndicate sends back in time so they can be executed in the past, so they can dispose of the body in the past, so they can hide they can hide all the evidence of these people getting killed in the future. However, when the loopers retire, basically, in order for the syndicate to cut their ties from these loopers, they basically, if the looper survives up until present time, that looper is sent back in time to be killed by themselves from the past, and that means that they're closing the loop on this whole job.
That sounds fascinating.
Yes, so what happens in this movie is Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the younger version, and then Bruce Willis plays the older version. So he's ready to close his loop, and they send Bruce Willis back, but Bruce Willis, in the future, has found peace and love and has turned over a leaf and wants to live a better life. So when he runs into Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's prepared for what's going to happen, and he gets away. And then this whole movie turns into this cat and mouse game of Joseph Gordon-Levitt trying to hunt down Bruce Willis. And then there's other things that happen in the movie involving Emily Blunt. That's to be left for you for your first viewing.
That sounds really fascinating. When do they kill Snoke?
You're really
when does that happen?
You're really like
when
that
does
movie.
That happen?
Last Jedi really messed you up, didn't it?
No, you know what's funny? I went to college with some kids who were really into early Ryan Johnson, between Looper and Brick, and they recommended both movies. And I actually worked at the movie theater when Looper came out, so I would walk into screenings and see elements of it, and it looked like the action sequences were filmed really well, and like I was interested in it, and I just never got around to seeing it. I would say the only thing that kind of took me out a little bit was how fucked up Joseph Gordon-Levitt's face looks.
Yeah, that looked kind of weird for sure.
Yeah, but no, I 100% want to watch this movie. It sounds like a really great time. I think I would really enjoy it.
It's a great score too. Just a little detail that I think you'll appreciate. So they don't want you to see who you're killing. They usually send the person back with a burlap sack over their head, and then you just shoot and kill them. So Mondo did the pressing for this, and the pressing came in like a nice, obviously it's a nice burlap sack, but the record comes inside of a burlap sack.
That is awesome. I love that. No, I'm excited to watch this movie now. I honestly just on my little Letterboxd need to watch list, I put it at the top, so I'll get to that soon.
Yeah, so you haven't seen it, and this is one of those that if I talk too much about it, it will give away a ton of spoilers, so I'll leave it at that, but it's definitely worth your time. It's a cool concept. I don't know, I really, really enjoy it.
That sounds great, and I'm going to 100% watch that, and I'm going to try to ignore Joseph Gordon-Levitt's horrible looking face. I have the Blu-ray, Ray. I'm going to put it in and I'm going to watch it.
Good.
So are you ready for my next pick?
Let's do it.
So this is more of like just a fun movie that I really enjoy. And every time I think about it, I'm like, damn, I really had a great time with this movie. And this movie is Happy Death Day.
That movie is a great time.
Yeah, and it's actually directed by this guy named Christopher Landon, who as I did on my YouTube channel recently, he wrote a couple of the Paranormal Activity movies, and he directed a movie from 2020 that I just watched that was really entertaining called Freaky with Vince Vaughn. That was
I want to see that.
It was really, really a good time. I think you would really like it. But yeah, I love Happy Death Day, and I think that it takes that time travel concept that's very Groundhog Day-esque, where you have this young woman, Tree, who's it's her birthday, and she's living on college campus, and she's kind of this like bitchy sorority girl, and her friend gives her this cupcake. She throws it away. She does all these different things, and she goes to this party at night, and she's lured into a tunnel, and she ends up getting killed by the school's mascot, which, oh my God, Ray, is that not the most horrifying mascot ever?
Who thought that was a good mascot?
I have no idea. So then she wakes up the next day, and it's the same day again, and she continues to live the same day over and over again, and comes to realize that the only way that she's going to be able to get out is if she discovers who the murderer is. And I thought that was such a fun concept to build off of, with that like Groundhog Day time travel premise of reliving the same day over and over and over again. And I love how it gets to the point, especially in the second film, when she plays into the death so much of like just constantly killing herself over and over again. But like watching her die over and over again, and it's like the film implies that like she's going through that pain, and that her body is like experiencing that, and that it's harder for her each time that it happens. And I think the whole concept of like being stuck in a time loop is really horrifying, of like, oh my God, I'm never going to see anything except for this same day over and over and over again. And I think the way they include all the different plot twists in this movie is super fun. I just think it's this, and I know it's probably a controversial opinion, I enjoyed the second movie. I think it's a really fun series. I'd be totally fine if they made another one, but this is one of those cases of like, Blumhouse is one of those really smart companies, because this movie cost them $4.8 million to make, and it made $125 million. So Blumhouse is like the king of production companies, of creating these really small scale films that they don't have to pay their actors a whole lot of money, and they end up making a shitload. And then you have actresses like Jessica Roth who blow up after this. So I love this movie. I think it's a blast. There's not much more to say about it because it's a pretty simple premise, but I think it's a lot of fun.
No, it's a good time. I remember being so apprehensive to watching this movie, because I was like, this is just a ripoff of Groundhog Day. And then Freaky comes out, and I'm like, this is just a ripoff of Freaky Friday.
Exactly, but they're doing it well. Yeah, exactly. Like, and then the thing is like Christopher Landon, who he's made some not so great films. Like, he wrote the movie Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. But he also wrote Paranormal Activity 2 through the most current one. So he's made some movies that aren't great, but he also wrote, I know a lot of people liked it, I never watched it, the movie Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse.
Never saw it.
I never saw that. I never saw it, but like, he worked on a lot of these movies. He wrote and directed both the Happy Death Day films. He's clearly someone with a passion for horror that like cares about the genre, and he always manages to include fun little tropes, but also like subvert your expectation as to what you would normally think would happen in one of these movies. And yeah, that's all I have to say about Happy Death Day. It's a good time. Watch it.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring Happy Death Day as your choice, as your Groundhog Day-esque repeating the same day over and over again, because my next pick is Edge of Tomorrow,
which I have never seen. So you can talk me through this Tom Cruise film that changed its name from Edge of Tomorrow to Live, Die, Repeat. Is that what they changed the name to?
No, so what happened was the director wanted to name it Live, Die, Repeat, and that's what he wanted to name it, and the studio said no. You can use it as your tagline, but you can't use it as the movie title. So they made him switch it to Edge of Tomorrow, and he hated the name so much that he purposefully made the Live Die Repeat tagline bigger than the actual movie title, just to give the studio a middle finger.
I love that. And I do know that this movie, it made like $400 million. I know it was like really successful, and I remember people saying a lot of positive things about it. I'm not really sure why I never saw it. So yeah, let me know what it's all about.
So it's very similar to Happy Death Day in the sense that it's a very Groundhog Day-esque type movie. So basically, Tom Cruise plays this, he's like a public relations, his name is William Cage, and he basically, what he does is he's a public relations officer. That's what he is. And he has almost no combat experience. And they're living in a future where, I believe London, it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I believe it's in London. It has been overtaken by an alien race. And they're about to do this attack on this race, and they're going to go to war. And Tom Cruise gets put on the front lines to go, and he doesn't want to go because he doesn't have any combat experience. He tries to basically escape and be a deserter, but he gets caught, and he's stripped of all his ranking, sent to the front lines, and ultimately gets killed, and then wakes up, and the day starts over.
Nice. So it's very similar to Happy Death Day / Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's a Groundhog Day, but basically, yeah, it's like a Groundhog Day, Happy Death Day, where he gets killed and then he wakes up and starts the day over until they figure out how to defeat the alien invaders. So basically, that's what he has to do. He has to figure out how to defeat the aliens, this alien race that has taken over the city of London. But every time he dies, the loop starts over. And yeah, that is the basic premise. And he meets Emily Blunt, who is like, because they wear these like exoskeleton suits that help them fight out in the field. And he's supposed to find her so she can train them, so they can figure out how to stop this invasion from happening. And yeah, basically, and she is like a total badass. Like, she is the top warrior, and he's going to be trained by her. So every day he has to re-meet her and convince her to help him. And, if they get killed, it starts over. So it's, again, same concept.
I love those types of premises. I think they're so much fun. And it's like, what I love about them too is like, you have that repeat premise and you get to a point where like the characters get comfortable in the fact of like, well, hey, I can keep dying because I'm going to keep coming back to life. But then like Happy Death Day, and I'm sure it happens similarly in Edge of Tomorrow, like our character starts to feel the pain more, and like you start to realize just what a real danger it is if you don't figure out the problem. And I love that.
Right. There's a great scene actually on Edge of Tomorrow where they're training. They haven't even gone into the field. They're just training, and Emily Blunt accidentally knocks him over, and he falls down and breaks his arm or something like that. And he's like, oh no, I'm supposed to go into battle tomorrow and I have a broken arm. And she's like, well, the loop is going to start over, and just shoots him point blank.
Oh my God. I love that. That sounds like 100% my cup of tea.
And I love that it's Tom Cruise though, because I feel like Tom Cruise is known to play these like really intense, and he's always the hardcore spy or the thrill junkie. On this one, he's basically playing a coward.
I love that, actually. I love the subversion of the expectation for him, because I do feel like in every movie he plays the, look at me, I'm the badass who knows how to do everything. And that would be cool to see him in that complete opposite role.
Yeah, like that the scene where he tries to desert and like leave the army, and it's different. It's so different seeing him play that kind of more of a coward character. So I love Edge of Tomorrow. Mondo did a beautiful pressing of it that I was able to get my hands on recently. So, yeah, Edge of Tomorrow. It was great. Go check it out. Well, now that we have repeated loops back and forth, it's time to break the loop and for you to tell me what your next pick is.
Perfect. So, this movie was recommended to me by my brother probably 500,000 times, and I was incredibly reluctant to see this movie. And it ended up becoming probably one of my favorite movies ever made. And also, the reason why I was reluctant to watch it is I'm not a huge anime person. Like, I don't normally get into anime. It's not like 100% my thing. But this movie is incredible, and it is called Your Name, directed by Makoto Shinkai. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I can't say I have.
So, I don't want to get too into detail with it because the time travel element in this film is a little bit of a spoiler, but I will give you the baseline premise. So you're introduced to these two characters. You have this young girl, and this young boy, who the young boy lives in Tokyo. He is like the school, and he's got this big close group of friends, and he's like sort of this popular kid. And you have this young girl who lives on the outskirts of Tokyo, who she like is very much in tune with the culture of where she lives. Her family is very much part of her life, whereas the guy is kind of just on his own. He's kind of doing whatever the hell that he wants to. One day, randomly, just out of nowhere, they wake up in each other's bodies. So the guy wakes up in the girl's body, and the girl wakes up in the guy's body. And they start having to try to live each other's lives. And it becomes this really crazy film where these two people, they're able to text each other and talk to each other about, like, leave each other messages in each other's phones. It's not like a back and forth text, but it's like one of them takes over the other person's body, and then they are like leave a message in their phone for them the next day when they wake up. And so that's the way they communicate with each other. Well, they start to fall in love with each other, and the guy decides that he wants to go meet this girl. And that is when the movie really takes off into something completely different that, I kid you not, Ray, when it happened, my jaw literally dropped. I was like, I have watched so many movies in my life written by American filmmakers or filmmakers from other countries that have not been able to write such an amazing plot twist into a movie. That, like, not only does this movie have an insane plot twist, it's just incredibly beautiful. It is probably one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, with the animation being absolutely gorgeous. There's this, like, Japanese rock band called Radwimps that did the entire score to the film. It is beautiful. I'm so into the music of this movie. It's definitely a genre you would like. It's really, like, harder alternative rock that, like, really plays into the score well. And I don't want to talk much more about it, because similar to what you said about Looper, if I get too much further into it, it's going to ruin the film for you. But I will just tell you that this movie made me cry like a baby like 15 different times. And it is just one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched. I've tried to get the score to this on vinyl like a million times, but like it's been sold out for forever, and it costs like $500. But I do have a beautiful Blu-ray copy of this movie, and Ray, this is one you will be obsessed with this movie if you watch it. It is so damn good.
That's what makes this genre so hard to come up with lists, especially when we try to stay spoiler free, because I cut out like 3 movies out of my list just for the pure fact that I didn't want to walk into spoiler territory.
And it's crazy because, like, the time travel element of this film, I can't even really bring it up as to what it is. The body switching part is fine because it's early on, but the time travel element of it is really like a really key component to this movie. And like, I just want you to see it. And everybody out there, if you have not seen it, just go watch this movie. It's absolutely beautiful. And even if you're not someone who normally is a person that like would gravitate towards the anime genre, I 100% promise you that this movie is accessible to everyone. It is brilliant. So Ray, let's get that number 1 pick, my man. I am ready.
Before we jump in there, I just want to point out that movie, Your Name, is distributed by Toho, and that's all I needed to know.
There you go. Hey, listen. Whatever gets you to watch it, that's all I care about.
I'm a strong supporter of Toho, so I will do it for my love of Toho Studios.
Good. So, what is your number 1 pick?
So my number 1 pick is a movie that I just watched last week for the first time.
Hell yeah. I love hearing that stuff.
Like I said, I was having such a hard time coming up with a list, especially because there were a handful of movies that I left out because I felt like if I talked too much about the time traveling aspect, it will be too much of a spoiler. So there was a handful of movies I had left out. So I just kind of got on Google and started searching for movies to check out in the genre, and I found this one, and I found it really interesting because this is a foreign film. It's a movie from Spain, actually, and it's in English. It's called Time Crimes.
I have never heard of it, but when I looked up time travel movies on Google, it kept coming up. So tell me all about it, because I know nothing about it at all.
So Time Crimes, or for our Spanish audience, Los Cronocrímenes.
No, hey, listen. That was muy bueno. I took 4 years of Spanish in my most recent college, and I'm not even going to try because I would be pathetic. But that was it sounds like an even cooler movie in Spanish. I'm not gonna lie. The title in Spanish sounds way cooler than Time Crimes.
So it was translated to Time Crimes, but if I were to do a literal translation, it's Chrono Crimes.
That's fucking rad. Like, listen, we just need to understand when foreign films are made and brought to the United States, just keep them in the original language. The titles are always cooler every time.
Yeah. If we were to translate verbatim, it would be the Chrono Crimes.
I just pulled this up on Wikipedia, and the poster is awesome.
That is why I watched it, because of that poster.
All right, tell me the plot. I'm ready to hear about it.
Okay, so this couple in the Spanish countryside, it's this really nice couple. They kind of have this nice big house out in the country, and they just like to spend their time there. This husband and wife. And one day he likes to have his binoculars. He has a pretty big property, so he likes to kind of look around his property with his binoculars. And one day he sees this woman undressing, and all he sees is this woman taking off her clothes, and he gets curious, like, why is this random woman stripping down in my property? So he goes investigating, and when he gets there, the woman is she seems to be dead. And when he sees this dead woman lying there, he kind of freaks out, and he gets attacked by this man that's covered in like this like reddish pinkish band-aids that he's wrapped around in. He gets stabbed, and he runs away from him, and he makes it to like this facility, and he finds a walkie-talkie and starts talking to this guy on the other side of the walkie-talkie. He was like, hey, are you being chased by this guy with bandages all over his face? And he's like, yes. He's like, he's coming your way. You need to make your way up to me. You will be safe here. And he starts making his way up, and eventually, this all happens in like the first 20 minutes of the movie, by the way.
Damn, that's a hell of a way to start.
So he makes it all the way up to this facility, and they see the guy pull out of a car, and he like looks through the window, the guy in the bandages, and he's like, oh, he found me, he saw me. He's like, hide here. And he hides inside of this chamber, and he's like, look, hide in this chamber. I have to manually shut the door, but once the door shuts, before it shuts, I'll sneak in with you. He's like, okay. So the door shuts, and the scientist doesn't get in with him. And then the latch opens, and he gets out of the latch, and the scientist is staring at him. Is like, who are you? And he realizes that where he got in was a time machine, and he has been transported back in time just a few hours before that incident.
Oh my god, this sounds incredible.
So now this guy knows what happens, and now he wants to go back to try to prevent from that woman from getting killed.
Okay, literally just your brief plot description. I'm like, I want to watch this movie now. I just want to give up sleep and just watch it.
HBO Max.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, if you could start a movie with that intense of a plot arc, like right out of the gate, you have hooked me 100%. Like, oh my god, yeah, I'm gonna watch this movie probably this week. This sounds like something I would love.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max. You know, it's subtitled for all you white people.
Yeah, fuck the white people. Learn how to read. Like, I don't know. What's so hard? Like, literally, Parasite won Best Picture. Some of you out there know how to read. Like, learn how to read.
No, but this movie's fantastic.
It also looks like, because I've got it pulled up on Wikipedia, it looks like a really small cast.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a small cast. You can tell it's a low-budget movie. The guy that directed this movie, he actually went on to direct Colossal.
Oh, my God, seriously?
Yeah, he went on. I mean, Time Crimes was his first movie, but then he eventually went on and directed Colossal. This movie was incredible. If you are sold already, don't watch any trailers, don't watch anything, because the trailers give away a little bit too much. But you find out after he does his first travel back in time to stop this crime from happening, and how everything starts hooking. I don't want to say more because I'm sure I could say it and it wouldn't be that big of a spoiler, but because I want you to have that blind experience like I did, I am not going to say more about it.
Then I am sold. I'm 100% going to watch it. Because, like, just like when you recommended Moorhead and Benson, I did not watch the trailer to any of those movies. I just went in off of what you told me in the episode. And I feel like that made those movies even more impactful. So I'm just going to, like, hold off 100%. Same with Your Name. Don't look anything else up about that movie. Just watch it.
But yeah, that Time Crimes, like I said, I wish I could spend more time talking about it, but it's one of those movies that you just have to experience, so I don't want to say anything else because I really want you to experience it.
I am going to watch that very soon. That was a great number one pick.
So now, I had to give a shout out to all my Spanish speaking friends out there.
Yes, listen, that plot sounds incredible, and I really want to watch that now.
Like I said, HBO Max, do it up.
So, are you ready for my number one pick?
Let's close this thing out the right way. What is it?
So, my number one pick is from a director whose career has kind of tanked, and he's made some not so great films that you enjoy. But this is one of the earliest films in his catalog, and this is... Hold
on. You just said he hasn't made great films that you enjoy. What are you implying, sir?
So he has made he's worked on a little film series you might be aware of called Jurassic World.
Oh no! Where is it going?
This is Mr. Colin Trevorrow, and this is going to be one of his earliest works, which I absolutely love. And this is a film starring Mr. Mark Duplass from the Creep series, and this film is called Safety Not Guaranteed.
I've been wanting to see that movie for so long.
This is one of probably my favorite films of all time. It's one of my favorite time travel movies and one of my favorite romantic comedies, and it also stars one of my biggest crushes in the world, Aubrey Plaza. And it also stars Jake Johnson from the New Girl TV show. And simply what it's about is you have our lead character played by Aubrey Plaza. She's a graduate who is working as an intern for a Seattle magazine, and she finds this little ad in the newspaper that says, I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, "Wanted, someone to go back in time with me. This is not a joke. You'll get paid after we get back. Must bring your own weapons. I have only done this once before. Safety not guaranteed." And so Jake Johnson's character, and this other intern who I wish his name is, oh my gosh, I got to look up his name because he is hilarious. His name is Karan Soni. If you saw his face, you would know.
The guy from Deadpool. He was in Deadpool.
Yes, he is hilarious. And so they road trip together, and all he gave out is a P.O. box. So they go stalk the P.O. box, and they find out that it's Mark Duplass, and he's working at a grocery store. Jake Johnson tries to go in and talk to him, and he's immediately off put by him. He thinks he's like a cop or something. And Aubrey Plaza's like, "Let me go do it." And Jake Johnson's like, "No, I don't want to put you in this scenario. I don't want you to get to a point where you're going to get in trouble." And she's like, "No, seriously, let me do it." So she goes up to him, and she's like, "So what kind of weapons will we need?" And he's like, "What?" She's like, do I need a gun? What do I need to bring with me?" And it's like, Aubrey Plaza playing that deadpan comedic role that she's so great. What happens is he ends up telling her that she can come train with him to find out if she's capable of doing it. And so they end up building a relationship together. He starts telling her a lot of personal, intimate details about his life. And what you find out is government agents start coming after him. And so you start questioning in your head, did this guy really create a time machine, or is he a lunatic? And he says they have to break into a government facility to steal the parts to finish doing it. And I know that I had you watch Creep, and so the type of performance that Mark Duplass is capable of giving. He gives a phenomenal performance in this movie, and he actually sings an original song in this that he wrote, and it's beautiful. And the movie is a beautiful love story, but it's also just a really incredible story about like how we as human beings are so easily able to take these concepts that are so much larger than life, like time travel, and immediately push the possibility out the window of like, okay, this person's just a lunatic. But then when things start coming into perspective of, is this possible? Could this really happen? It sends your mind spiraling. And this is a movie that's just absolutely beautiful. And I think, Ray, that just like thinking about it now, it's something that you would really love. And with how much I know you enjoyed the Creep franchise, and I know you liked Mark Duplass, his performance in this movie is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite actors. I purposely seek out anything he's in. I think he's just so charismatic and fun and hilarious. And this movie's great, and it's why it's number one on my list. It's one of my favorite time travel movies of all time.
Well, and I love Aubrey Plaza. I don't think I've ever expressed that, but I think she's hilarious. But I also think Aubrey Plaza to me is that type of actor that she plays these like really deadpan, almost like detached jerk roles. But I also have a feeling that she's probably like the sweetest person in real life.
She's also incredibly attractive. She, like, honestly, like, I swoon over Aubrey Plaza all the time. I watched this video the other night. It was really hilarious that she was on BuzzFeed.
Thirst
like,
tweets?
reading people's thirst tweets. Oh, my God. And I was like, yep, that's me. I'm tweeting from multiple anonymous accounts telling you to step on me.
She's hilarious.
No, but she is great, but I also think I've heard about this new movie that was just released that she's in called Emily the Criminal.
I
heard
see that.
She gives a really incredible, nuanced performance, and I think she is an actress who's capable of doing that. I got really upset for a while that she was getting cast in all those boner comedies, and I'm like, you're wasting your potential. You're way more talented than that. And now she's doing a lot more films that I'm really into, but her performance in this movie especially, she plays that deadpan role like in Parks and Rec, a lot of movies, but I feel like this is a much more subdued, like she gives that a little bit, but for the most part, she just plays kind of this really inviting, interesting person who has a really great sense of humor. So yeah, Safety Not Guaranteed. I love it. It's such a great movie. You should definitely watch it.
Well, now I kind of want to travel back in time so I could have seen all these movies.
And that is why we pay you the big bucks on this show, Ray. Always with the one-liners that make me laugh a little too hard.
The funny thing is every time I hear back these podcasts, I'm like, God, that was awful.
No, it's wonderful. I love it. So that is our time travel list. That's the end of our science fiction journey together so far. We're going to be back. We're going to do more science fiction films. I guarantee it, because Ray and I love this genre. I know we're definitely going to be doing a kaiju episode at some point, because Ray will lose his mind if he never gets a chance to. I just have to lock myself in a room and watch as many Godzilla movies as I possibly can. So that is our time travel list. So now I want to do what has become probably one of my favorite parts of the podcast, which is ask you, Ray, what did you watch this week? What have you been enjoying?
You know what's funny about this segment now that I really enjoy, because now I feel like, throughout the week I'm thinking of these episodes and what we're going to discuss, but always in back of my mind is, crap, it's Wednesday and I don't have a film to talk about, so let's go seek out something new to talk about for the episode. So as I mentioned last week, I resubscribed to Shudder, so I've been really, digging into the Shudder catalog. I finally saw The Prowler.
Yes.
And The Prowler was incredible. I am kind of upset that all these years you hear... And let me start off by saying no shade at any of the movies I'm about to mention. But I am kind of upset that movies like Friday the 13th, or hell, even Halloween, that I adore, have gotten so much publicity, but no one talks about The Prowler.
Yeah, I have never seen it, but I've heard nothing but great things about The Prowler in my life.
It was great. It was a great slasher. The characters were a little smarter. I mean, obviously there's some stupid characters like every slasher, but like the main characters, you actually kind of legitimately care for them and are rooting for them. It was a good time. It was bloody. The those special effects back then, like the practical blowing heads off type things, are just incredible that they were able to pull off some of that really gory, violent stuff. But yeah, the Prowler was great. Honestly, like I immediately ordered the score as well from Waxwork. It was a good time. I really enjoyed the Prowler. Another one that I was able to see, that I was had a great time with. I actually saw Bullet Train in theaters,
Heck
and
yeah.
I'm really frustrated that it's getting as many bad reviews as it is, because I feel like this is a prime example of all these critics holding their nose up high, thinking they're bigger and mightier than thee because they have this high caliber taste. Just because Bullet Train is, 2 hours of suspended disbelief, gore, and humor nonstop. The movie's hilarious. I'm sorry, I want to go back in time and slap my younger self in the face for ever doubting Brad Pitt. The man is hilarious. He's a great actor. I was laughing the whole time, but also the rest of the cast was really good. I was telling Nate off the podcast that it reminded me. It's directed by the same guy that did the John Wick movie, so you can expect a lot of like crazy suspended disbelief action, but at the same time like really quirky and fast dialogue. A lot of people complain about the fact that this movie kind of jumps around a lot between characters, but it did it in such a way that I was really enjoying it. And yeah, it's not a perfect movie. There's some really heavy exposition there on the third act, but other than that, like, the movie was fun. I was laughing from the first frame all the way to the closing frame. Like, I was just laughing. I was having a good time, and I really enjoyed Bullet Train. Honestly, like, if you want to go watch like a really fun movie that obviously if you think about it for longer than 5 minutes, you will find a lot of holes in it. But if you just want to have a good time watching a movie, go check out Bullet Train. It was hilarious.
And sometimes that's exactly what you need when you're watching a movie. You just need to watch something that's gonna like bring you some kind of joy.
Well, and this week I was just gonna mention, this week has been like, my anxiety and depression has been flaring. Well, I kind of fixed some of the issues that I was having, but it was flaring up pretty bad. Like, Monday, Tuesday, I was kind of having some really hard times, and being able to just sit down and watch a movie that was just like, I had my Coke, I had my pizza, and I was just laughing hysterically throughout the whole thing was just what I needed, really.
And isn't that the most beautiful thing about film as a whole, is that it can bring you that joy and just kind of immerse you into another place. Like, that's the best thing in the world that movies can do.
Those were the two that I've checked out a bunch of stuff this week, but those are the two that I wanted to focus on that I checked out.
Well, I have two that I want to talk about that I will check out. The first one is one I talked to Ray about off the podcast called Uncle Peckerhead, which is probably the greatest name to a movie ever. And it's about these three kids who are in a punk rock band who they decide they want to go on tour, and their van gets repossessed. So they start posting flyers, and this guy says, "Hey, I'll drive you around." And the guy turns out to be this cannibalistic demon monster who befriends all of them and starts killing concert promoters for them, which if you're a music person and you're a person who goes to concerts on a regular basis, especially more like, smaller venue, intimate show concerts, you kind of get the perspective from the musicians, and it's honestly just a really great horror movie that's also like genuinely heartwarming and also a great commentary about the music industry. And the original music for the film by the band, they call themselves Duh, which I thought was like the greatest punk rock band name ever. It's so much fun, and I had a dumb smile on my face through the whole movie. And Ray, you got to watch this thing on Tubi. You're gonna love it. I know you're gonna text me as soon as you're done and be like, "Dude, I'm ordering the Blu-ray now."
Oh man, I'm excited. I'm really excited. You did tell me a little bit about it, and I'm pretty stoked to get on it. I already have it pulled up on like my phone just to remind myself to watch it.
And the other movie I want to bring up is actually one that I heard some people talk about at film festivals earlier this year that they watched, and that is the film Resurrection, starring Rebecca Hall, who is becoming one of my favorite actresses. She was in a film in 2021 called The Night House that I really enjoyed. But Resurrection reminded me of a film that I've talked to Ray about before, the 1981 film Possession. And the movie is about a woman played by Rebecca Hall who works as like a human relations person at this business, and she lives at home with her daughter. And everything is seemingly going okay in their lives. And one day she goes to this conference, and Tim Roth, the actor, his character shows up there, and she sees him, and she literally just bolts running out, like crying, and you don't know what's going on. And she starts randomly seeing him at all these different places, to the point where she ends up going to the police and saying, this guy from my life is showing up. I'm scared for the lives of me and my daughter. They're like, we can't do anything. He hasn't done anything to you. And so one day she sees him in a park, and she approaches him, and she's like, you need to leave. I haven't seen you in years. Like, get out of here. And he's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, stop the bullshit. And he immediately starts pouring out all this information about her and her family, and just walks off. And the story is this really like gripping psychological drama of who is this person? What has he done in her life? And it takes this almost like supernatural twist. And a lot of the themes in the film are very reminiscent of Alex Garland's Men, except done in a much more nuanced and interesting way. And Rebecca Hall gives probably my favorite performance of the entire year so far. This movie like really took me by surprise. It's haunting, it's horrifying, and everybody needs to see it. I think it's like, right now it's not on any of the streaming services, but I think you can pay like $6.99 to rent it. And it's totally worth the money. It was one of my favorite things I've watched all year.
Every time we talk about these movies, I like pull up different screens on my phone, and I just kind of have them open to remind myself.
So that is the movies that Ray and I watched and recommended this week. And as always, if you'd like us to talk about some movies or watch some movies, or you have suggestions, we'll always take them over at the Film Monsters podcast on Instagram, where we post about new episodes. Ray runs some fun polls sometimes. We just kind of do whatever the hell we want. So yeah, you can always reach out to us over there, or you can check us out on our personal Instagrams, Ray at Analog C and myself at My Exit Unfair. And we're about to start our new series next week, which we are going to talk about the production company A24. And for the first episode, Ray and I are going to give you guys 5 recommendations of A24 films that we feel like are underrated or not talked about enough.
Yep, so get ready for that. It's going to pain me to not talk about some of the more obvious ones, but that is the point of doing the underrated ones, to shine light on the ones that we probably haven't gotten a lot of love lately.
Yeah, there's so many movies in A24's catalog, and I feel like there's so many movies from them. Like Ray mentioned one, and I'm sure we might talk about it, but the film Locke that I ended up watching, and it's so great, and it's unfortunate that more people don't talk about movies like that, because it's like, oh, everybody, when they hear A24, now it's like Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Witch, The Lighthouse, Midsommar, like all those movies come up, but like some of these smaller, lesser known films, it's just disappointing more people don't talk about them. So that's what Ray and I are going to try to do with that episode in particular.
So we're excited. So get your A24 on next week with us. We'll have a good time.
Yes, we're really looking forward to this series, and that series is going to lead us in to getting closer to Ray and I's favorite time of year, spooky season, which Ray and I have some fun shit cooked up for you guys for the spooky season. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too.
So, as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
What number am I thinking of?
12?
69, dude!
Goodbye, everyone.